I really appreciated this, and maybe you don't have me in mind. But when I heard you asking this, I'm like, oh, he's thinking of my favorite argument, what I spend the most time on, the free thinking argument. And you said, you asked Dr. White, you said, Calvinism is often associated with universal divine determinism.
I was thinking of you.
There you are. Yeah, thank you. I knew you would. I knew you were.
Some people say, I didn't say.
Oh, that's awesome. And you talked about that we're nothing but puppets on Calvinism, things like that. And then you asked, how would you respond to the idea that if this exhaustive divine determinism?
Yeah. By the way, I'm going to stop you real quick, and
okay.
This might make you feel happy. I have to think about how I would word it. And I don't think I'd be able to word it to your satisfaction because we're going to disagree over definitions. But not that I disagree with Dr. White's view in general. I did not find his response to my question as it stood in that conversation as persuasive. It kind of seemed, and I don't want to accuse him of dodging, but it seemed as though he dodged the import of my question. And so I wasn't satisfied with how he responded, although in a general sense, if we had a longer, kind of more casual talk, I probably would agree with his explanation. I don't think he gave a good one when we had the conversation there.
I appreciate you saying that, and I guess I don't really have to say too much because I'll say a little bit. But yeah, I've listened to his response several times, and I don't even know what it meant. But you asked him, how would you respond to this very common objection? Basically, let me read it here. You said that if exhaustive divine determinism is true, you didn't use that word, but then you said, I think this is a quote here, then you cannot hold to Calvinism rationally since you've been determined to do that. It really just has a self-refuting foundation that even if it were true, you couldn't know it to be true, because you've been determined all the way around. And then he said, how would you respond to that very common objection? Mm-hmm. And so thank you for asking that question. White's response was, well, it's common, but it's not well thought out. And that just, that irked me, man, because I've got an entire master's thesis focused on this argument and a PhD dissertation, which focuses on this from the same university that James White attends, right, that demonstrates that this objection is actually thoroughly thought out quite nicely.
Well, there's a big difference between saying it's not well thought out and it's false. It can
right.
be thought out but false.
Yes, exactly.
You can't make it look like people haven't thought about this question because they obviously
have.
That's right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So what Dr. White offered as refutations of this argument. Mm-hmm. He said things that it was just an emotional, feelings-based objection, and that if you push it back far enough, what the person is saying is, and this is a quote, unless you have creaturely autonomy and no decree at all, there can be no reality to anything that God does in time. That's fundamentally what is being said. And then White concludes, quote, that fundamentally destroys the reality and importance of the actions of Jesus in the incarnation. And I just don't understand this. I mean, I would love to have him flesh this out more, but I'll say the free thinking argument that I've spent years and years now. I mean, I think I first crafted it in 2011 or 2012, maybe. And I've spent the majority of my academic work focused on this argument now. And the free thinking argument has absolutely nothing to do with feelings or emotions. Absolutely nothing. It's a logically sound, it's valid, it's structurally valid, and the premises seem to be true. Thus, it's a sound argument. So it's got nothing to do with feelings or emotions. And second, he brings up the incarnation of Christ, but it has absolutely nothing to do. The incarnation has nothing to do with the free thinking argument. So let's quickly examine the argument's premises to see if it's based on feelings, emotions, or Christmas. The incarnation. So, and I won't give the whole thing. I'm just going to give the core of the free thinking argument. It's not against naturalism, not against Calvinism. It's simply for libertarian freedom. It says nothing about God, Christianity, Calvinism, Molinism, Arminianism, open theism, atheism, naturalism, or any other ism. So here's the core. It's two premises and a conclusion. One, if humans are not free in the libertarian sense, they cannot either rationally infer or rationally affirm claims of knowledge. Two, humans can rationally infer and rationally affirm claims of knowledge. Three, therefore, humans are free in the libertarian sense. So I'm sure that White will want to affirm the second premise. So the key premise is the first. But with that in mind, think about this. If all of our thoughts and beliefs are always forced, there's that word, causally determined upon us all the time, and we can never have chosen better thoughts and beliefs, then we are simply left assuming that our determined thoughts and beliefs are good, let alone that our beliefs are true. Therefore, then we can never rationally affirm that our beliefs really are the inference to the best explanation. We can only assume it, and that assumption would not be up to you either. It's simply completely out of our control. So here's the significant problem for the exhaustive determinist, whether it be naturalistic or divine, right? It logically follows that if naturalistic determinism or divine determinism is true, then determinists, or anyone else for that matter, cannot possess justification for their specific beliefs, which is traditionally and typically minimally required for knowledge, for claims of knowledge. So one can happen to have true beliefs. However, if they do not possess justification for a specific belief, then their belief then would not qualify as a knowledge claim, at least traditionally. So with this in mind, if one cannot freely infer the best explanation, then one has no justification that their belief really is the best explanation. And without justification for a belief, any claim of knowledge regarding said belief seems to go down the drain, and all we're left with is question-begging assumptions, which I don't think is, it seems that knowledge goes down the drain here. But obviously, humans possess the ability to rationally affirm claims of knowledge, as I'm sure James White agrees. He, on his Dividing Line show, he's always offering claims of knowledge, right? So to argue against this would affirm it, as one would have to offer claims of knowledge to the contrary. Mm-hmm. And moreover, if one rejects the ability to rationally affirm knowledge claims, well, why should anybody listen to him? Anyway, I know that White's not going to do that. So therefore, if that's the case, then libertarian freedom is possessed by humanity, at least when it comes to thinking things through, right? Does James White have the ability to evaluate and judge one way or the other if Molinism is the inference to the best explanation or not? Note the range of options from which to choose. And if one doesn't have a range of options, then you're left in no epistemic position to rationally affirm your thoughts and beliefs. Mm-hmm. So a short thought experiment clarifies my point nicely, I think. I'm going to substitute James White in here to help. So suppose a mad scientist somehow got control of Dr. White's brain. And so this mad scientist now exhaustively controls and causally determines all of James White's thoughts and beliefs all the time. And this includes exactly what White thinks of and about, and exactly how White thinks of and about it. So all of White's thoughts about his beliefs and all of White's beliefs about his thoughts are caused and determined by the mad scientist. And this also includes the next words that will come out of James White's mouth. So here's a question for Dr. White. How can you, not the mad scientist, rationally affirm the current beliefs in your head as good, bad, better, the best, true, or probably true? Note the range of options from which to choose without begging the question. Good luck with that. It's impossible. So then I just say replace the mad scientist with physics and chemistry or God or anything else, and one has the exact same rationality problems but for different reasons. However, since James White does possess the ability to rationally infer and affirm knowledge claims, and to argue otherwise is to affirm it, well, then we know that at least James White possesses the libertarian freedom to think and take certain steps while deciding what he ought to affirm and believe. And since libertarian freedom seems to be metaphysically impossible if humanity is nothing but physical stuff, we can rationally infer that humanity is more than merely the physical, and we can start to get into the soul and the image of God and what that means. So anyway, with all of this in mind, notice what is irrelevant to the free thinking argument. I've not made any appeal to emotions or feelings only facts and logic. And also notice that this argument has nothing to do with Christmas. And and it also says nothing about 5-point Calvinism. So you can still be a 5-point Calvinist and affirm the free thinking argument and affirm limited libertarian freedom, like Greg Koukl does. He's an ardent 5-point Calvinist, but he's going to agree with me when it comes to the free thinking argument. So you can be I don't think Calvinists should appeal to exhaustive divine determinism. They can appeal to determinism when it comes to salvation. I disagree with that personally, but I will gladly say maybe I'm wrong about that and say, okay, fine, keep that. Keep your tulip, but I don't think you should affirm exhaustive divine determinism. I don't think it's biblical, and it definitely doesn't make logical sense of all the data, from biblical data to logical data. And I really, not only does Koukl and Crisp and other well-known Calvinists, Mueller, they will affirm that today. But I really do believe that Luther, Calvin, and Melanchthon and other reformers, 500 years ago, based on their own words, and I've got their block quotes in my dissertation. So stay tuned for that. But I really believe they would affirm limited libertarian freedom. So the question is then, if you've got limited libertarian freedom, which follows from the free thinking argument, and I can use biblical data to support this too. Start with 1 Corinthians 10:13. At least Christians seem to have this kind of freedom. But if there's any kind of limited libertarian freedom anywhere, the question is, did God know those free choices logically prior to his creative decree? Was God surprised by it? And did God predestine it, these free actions? So if God's not surprised by it, and if he knew logically prior to his creative decree from eternity past, and God still is sovereign and predestines it, then I don't see any other way to do it besides Molinism and middle knowledge. So all that is, sorry for just preaching a little sermon there.
No, that's fine.
Okay,
Well,
cool.